In case you don't know, you are watching the Modern Job Search Checklist. Welcome and thank you very much for watching. We appear every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 o'clock Central to help bring you the best job search help and advice as we possibly can. And waiting for Damian Birkel, my co host, to come along and join us, and he will as soon as he can. He's on travel and is joining in from where he normally isn't. But until that, we have Hannah Morgan with us. And Hannah is, if you followed me for a long time, I drag Hannah kind of everywhere I go in some kind of capacity or way, or whether it's an article, or whether it's a video, or whether it's the podcast. She's always around. Welcome, Hannah Morgan. Hannah, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me again and again and again.
Yes, I
Yeah.
know, right? It's always been a great partnership throughout the years. It's just
I
a
love
lot of
the
years.
work that you're doing. You're
Well,
awesome.
thank you, and I love the work that you do as well.
Thank you.
So, we want to be sure that you guys chat it up in the chat, so I can see who is hanging out with us and who isn't. Make some noise, ask some questions. Feel free to comment on what we're talking about as we try to bring you what's relevant. We're basically talking about what's good, what's bad, and of course, all the ugly that's coming out right now and the confusion. And boy, there's so much to report on. It's almost like for those of us create content, it's easy because we like the bad stuff to kind of turn into the good stuff for you guys. So hopefully that you'll come along with us from this ride that we're doing here. In the meantime, let's go on to the first topic. And, there's a statement you and I talked about resumes over the years, and both of us kind of have this disdain for them in some sort of way.
Yep.
But we're going to talk about them here because it's still part of the job search. It
Yep.
is a necessary part of the job search. They're not going away anytime particular soon unless somebody officially says, I'm not doing them anymore, which everybody probably has said that at one particular time or another. But there's a statement I saw on LinkedIn. I think this is typical of what I see and also leaves some. Mm, bitterness in my heart in some ways. Um, and this is, if we're going to put it in a true or false statement, it's impossible to stand out if your resume is just like everyone else's. Now, at first, when you read that, you go, doggone, that's true. But doggone it, I read this like 50 times already. And still, I just had this unsteadiness about it. So, Hannah, I'd love your take on this particular issue.
Okay, so if we're talking about a resume that you are using through an applicant tracking system to apply for a job, then your resume should be traditionally formatted and it should have the same sort of look and feel as all the other resumes, I believe. Where I think that, and some of the discussion that was going on later and regarding the statement is that you no two seekers have the same set of skills. None of them. So if
Mhm.
you say that you're dedicated, hardworking, and a real go-getter, I can pretty much guarantee you there are 1,000 other candidates that say they're dedicated, hardworking, and a go-getter because those are
Mhm.
things that are so trite and so meaningless. And I
Yes.
think part of this is that's what I took that statement to mean. If you're using this just boring, trite language that doesn't really convey your unique message and your unique value and who you are, then I think that's where job seekers get into problem. And I read a lot of them that are almost generic. I read like a sentence. I'm like, that could be 1,000, 2,000 people when I read that. Hardworking, engineer with over 20 years of experience. Okay,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
doesn't tell me anything. That's nothing.
Right. Right. And I think I don't think even I've seen two bad resumes throughout the years that I've looked at resumes and have written them and counseled on them or even hired from over the years. When I was hiring back in the day, I think I've seen maybe a couple of thousands, and probably about 999,000 of them, or 999,000 were really bad. But I really, the other part of it is the I understand too that part of it is just a marketing statement, that career pro or the resume writer who puts it out there. And I'm not going to say who wrote the particular thread, because she is a friend of the show. She's been on the show, and that she's gave great content, and she puts out great content. And really, what she wrote was great content. But I'm just focusing in, just for
That
clarification,
one
what
sentence,
that
yeah.
one sentence is, something that is often thrown out as bait.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying the person wrote it as bait, but I'm saying that very often we get, and there's another statement that we'll talk about later in the show, that's also a marketing bait to me. And I'm
Yeah,
tired of it, because there's some anomalies to that more than this statement. This
yeah.
statement rings true a little bit more, in a sense, because yeah, but we often, you and I can read into it and get it. Somebody who's looking on, that strikes a little fear in someone's eyes, and that's where I kind of depart from the intention of it.
And you know me, I think that the resume is certainly, it has to be a marketing piece, and for anybody who's never had to write anything marketing, like, they don't
Hmm.
know how to write their own resume. Like, it's not easy.
No.
And I'm not suggesting that people go hire somebody, but you're going to have to do some research and come up to speed so that you can use good language to describe yourself. I do believe, and I'll do the shout out for, there is a place and time for a graphic or infographic or
Hmm.
visual resume.
Right.
But that is certainly not sort of what we're talking about here when we're going through sort of the mainstream application process. That's not where or when you would be using a graphic resume.
Yeah. Well, and I know where you're pointing to. You've got a book and
Yeah,
you've
what?
got infographics. And yeah, I get it. But but I think the other part too is that nobody just relies on a resume anymore. Nobody
Mhm.
just really, and therefore, when you get into the social aspect, and when back in 2010, 2011, that statement was kind of a no brainer, because really employers were checking our resumes on the back end to
Mhm.
make sure that you weren't drinking beer on a social picture, on a photograph, or that you haven't committed a crime, and those things were done on the back end. This time they're checking, and actually sometimes that initiates the contact, is
Yeah.
that your social information has generated some interest, so therefore they'll want the resume. And I've seen and even heard from employers that they'll even subvert the resume to get to the person, because it's obvious that the person has demonstrated a great amount of business and intelligence and acumen for them to hire.
Absolutely. So, and that's why, and I think you and I have always been sort of advocates of being active, job seekers,
Hmm.
being active on social media, because it's an amazing way to broaden your reach and to get to have more interaction and engagement, and to prove you can walk the walk and talk the talk, and you know what the heck you're talking about. So, yeah, it's happening sooner, and thank goodness. I think that's a great thing for candidates that are out there looking for work, as long as they know this. And that's part of the message that we have to always be reinforcing, is that whatever you say online is visible to future employers. And we've been training our kids for a very long time that whatever you
Hmm.
put online is visible to colleges, and the
Yeah.
colleges are looking at this stuff as part of the application process. So employers are doing the same thing. So
Yeah.
the younger kids get it.
Yep. They do. They do. And that kind of brings on the whole idea, and it's become a big deal because it's a platform that's dedicated. TikTok has
TikTok
the TikTok
resumes.
resumes.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of people who poo-pooed it. But I tell you, once an employer says we're looking on TikTok for to hire, Who cares about what's on paper? What's on paper is second. Somebody's able to communicate in a 15-second time or 60-minute, whatever that time period is. They're able to communicate their accomplishments and what there is, that they communicate the value. They're going to be interested. And then we're not talking about just video companies. We're talking about big companies going in on it and
Yes.
finding information. And you might find some of the most interesting advice for career advice on TikTok. Did
Are
you
you on
know?
TikTok yet?
Huh?
Are you on
Yep,
TikTok?
I'm on TikTok. I've done a few things to kind of tease, but I found my time a little bit better on Instagram,
Yeah.
just to kind of parse it out. That's just me.
Yeah.
And, but having said that, TikTok has the hashtag career advice. This past summer they had over 80 million people following, or there was 80 million pieces of career advice under
Wow.
that hashtag career advice.
That's
So
awesome.
which tells me is that is something that you want to pay attention to, especially if you're a young person
Yep.
who is somewhat creative. That's another way to share your message and share your value.
Yes, and so often I've heard job seekers tell me, if I could only get in front of the employer and talk about myself, I know I could sell myself, right?
Yeah.
Well, here's your chance. Do you remember years ago, Zappos had
Yes.
the ability to submit a resume cover
Yes.
letter with
Yes.
all of their applications? So they did
Mhm.
this. Oh my gosh, that was like 5 years ago or more.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what's coming back and with a fury, thanks to TikTok and
Yeah.
Instagram
Which
and
which is funny you should mention cover letter. And I am going to take a slight tangent over to cover letters. But I do think that there's an anomaly with even the it was discussed on LinkedIn. I'm feeling stronger about it more than I have been in the past. The word cover letter is kind of a misnomer. Because
okay.
really, because cover letter, you're suggesting that maybe it's a cover to a book, which really doesn't have to be all that particular. After all, these days cover letters are kind of much shorter. People are writing them in three paragraphs or less,
Mhm.
more or less like around the 150, 200 word. That I'm looking more and I'm convinced, and it was Stephen Covey that got my juices flowing this past over in the past, that he said that you should write more of a contribution statement. And I do think that a contribution statement, and the statement, we can talk about word count and how brief or how short, but I think if people understand even the resume and the cover letter as to what they're contributing, I think people will be so much further along in their communication and their value of their value than they've ever had before. Because cover letter does it is just, I mean, the word itself just kind of,
Yeah.
but saying
Yeah.
that's a contribution statement, you're forced to think, okay, not just what I can contribute, what can I contribute that the company needs?
Yeah.
And if people thought about resumes in the same way, there wouldn't be as bad as we would think it would be.
I think that there is a lot of misunderstanding about those two documents, and
Mhm.
it has to go back to high school and junior high and what is being taught at that level about what these documents are. And it's hard at that age to write a resume, but because you don't have a lot of sort of quote unquote achievements, but they do, and that's where I think if we could get to these kids earlier in life, then
Mhm.
that skill would continue to evolve and grow, and they'd be so much further ahead in this process. Most kids, I've got a kid in college and a kid in high school. They have
Mhm.
not written a letter. They've never typed a letter ever in their
Mhm.
whole life.
Right.
So how do they know how to write a cover letter,
Right.
right?
Right. Right. Well, when adults can't write a cover letter, then how can we expect
No, I
just
know.
children
I
to
know
write cover
because they
letters?
haven't typed letters either,
Right.
right?
Right.
So a lot of people, I mean, it's sort of, it's very discriminatory because there are a lot of professions that would never have to write a letter, and
Yeah.
yet they have to write a cover letter.
Yeah, yeah, it's the ugly part of job search that really sometimes it doesn't make any sense. And we've got people who say they're resume writers who write cover letters and resumes who can't write cover letters and resumes. But that's a whole nother discussion. I don't wanna
Yeah.
that's a whole nother discussion. But generally it's all about, and what I want to do is kind of help clarify what that message should be that you're sending in to an employer. And the phrase I often use these days is that you got to concentrate on being the prescription to the employer's job description. You've got to think you are the remedy, and you've got to think about what is the actually the problem is, and be exact with your prescriptive with the approach. You got to be prescriptive, and you got to be direct, and you've got to be addressing the problem, not dressing around it or what you think it might be. You've got to kind of know what it is and dig to get that information.
Yes, I totally agree with that, Mark. And then, so I often say I don't write resumes, but I'm a great job posting reader. If
Yes,
you look at the job description, the job posting, it tells you exactly what you need to do. You just need to
arguably.
say, well,
Arguably.
right, I know, because some are horrible. They're
But you
better
wouldn't
than
wanna
they
look
used to
at
be.
just right, but you wouldn't, and not it, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you don't just wanna look at the job description. You've gotta start to get some intelligence, or, maybe look through other job descriptions. So, because, the website can be a different job description. And of course, the person that holds the position or past person
Oh,
can
absolutely.
also they will have the most accurate feeling and view of what that job description actually is.
Absolutely. So what I think a lot of job seekers think they just need to do is take and they say, "You mean I just copy what's in the job description and put it on my resume?" And
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
say,
I know.
"No, no, 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 no. You have to take it a step further. You ask yourself, have I ever done anything like what they're asking in this job description?" And then
Mhm.
use that accomplishment story on the resume. So it's harder than just copying and pasting. You actually have to, what have I done that's similar to this? When have I done this? Okay, that's the story you're going to tell in your resume.
Yes, absolutely, and I think that you put it so succinctly. I'm not going to even touch that. It's so much right on. But yeah, sometimes you could be the best reader of those job descriptions, and the job description didn't do the justice to the position that it actually should have.
Yeah, and you were talking about doing your due diligence and doing your research, and I had worked with the one client at one point, and she had that sort of informational conversation with somebody who was inside the company before
Right.
she actually applied. Thank
Hmm.
goodness. I'm so glad she did that.
Right.
And during the conversation, the woman, her friend that she was talking to inside the company said, "Oh, by the way, we're getting ready to be bought out. There's going to be a merger or acquisition kind of thing going on."
Mm.
But it was nowhere in the job description.
Oh
Right?
wow.
And so because they couldn't, like, they didn't say, "We need somebody experienced with mergers and acquisitions." It was an HR role. So
Right.
this woman, because she had that experience, had worked on a company that did a merger, she
Hmm.
included that in her resume. And guess what?
Yes,
Yeah, she got
yes,
she
yes,
got the
yes.
interview.
Absolutely, and that's the other thing is getting that kind of intelligence that's not going to be in the job description. But that was a critical point because you had got a chance to show you that you've been through that,
Yeah,
and you know how to navigate that space. Why not? And I'm sure nobody else had that piece in their resume.
right.
And also in the conversation, you have to also be able to talk pretty intelligently about what that experience is like, and for it to resonate with, because mergers, not all mergers and acquisitions are made the same, and
Right.
they look a lot different than anything else that you've ever done. So I think that's a big piece of that, and I think that was a, and Damien's in the is in the
Hey,
chat.
let him
Um,
in. Hey,
he wasn't
Damien.
he wasn't able to get in. This is he's here and he's around. So Damien's going to write his comments. I'm going to read them wherever we get a chance to. But yeah, so I think the whole resume idea is that people need to do a lot more work than they think they do. It's undersold as to how much work it actually takes. Even before you start your job search, you got to you got to get a handle on the industry. because each parts of the industry looks different than the others,
Yeah.
and what you know about one part of the industry may inform you about the other part of the industry. So that's why, people get freaked out, say, well, I don't want to write a resume every time I apply to a company. Well, if the company's job description is different, is sort of like dating somebody different every week. You can't
Yeah.
treat everybody the same.
Right. Right.
So,
Absolutely.
Damien, you could write your comment. We'll come back to you as we move on to the next topic, because the next topic is going to be probably even just as robust as we could talk about resumes. Many job seekers, when you leave a company, I get it. It feels like a breath of fresh air. Your hopes are up, your faith is high, but also now, there's some things that are confusing about the job search, that it really has turned into a jungle, because just this week we've seen articles about the ATS and the arguments of whether how the ATS is helpful resumes, or whether is it true that that employers are really advertising for the right job, or they're advertising for something else. So let's talk a little bit about what job seekers should be wary about and what they should look out. Maybe even just to put in even better plain English, the snags and snares of job search. I know you always have a bunch, because
Yeah.
we've talked about them over the years, and some of them might be the same, but I think this job search is a little bit different, because the promise is quite high right now, that everybody's rebelling against the old way of work. Well, if you were job searching badly before and you didn't change anything, it's going to look bad now.
Yeah, and I was talking to somebody this week, and they said, back in when was it? February, March, April, May, I was really
Mhm.
gung ho. I was putting in a lot of effort into my job search, and I just really wasn't getting anywhere. So I stepped back, and I said, you know what? I don't think you necessarily were doing anything wrong in April, May, February, May. There just wasn't anything happening then.
Right,
So
right.
I said, pick back up where you left off and see if what you were doing back then will work now, rather than
Mhm.
reinventing the whole wheel. Because I think that we're in a much hotter job market now. In other words, there are more jobs, there are more opportunities, and employers seem to be a little bit more eager to bring people on. But that leads me to one of the biggest, most horrendous things happening right now is that employers are bringing candidates in for 5, 6, 7, 11 interviews to
Yeah,
try and decide whether or not they're the candidate. Are you
yeah,
kidding me, Mark?
yeah.
What's that about?
Jack had a one of his guys, one of his clients had 14 interviews. They got the job, but 14 interviews. And I've talked with some others, including a guest that's going to be on an upcoming episode on the podcast this fall. We they had like 10 interviews. Then they got $100 for their time. They got cash for their time. And so, yeah, that is one of the things that we'll let on to, is that great to quick, but if you're in an industry, there's some industries that are hiring that they're normal. Let's get this clear here. Not every industry is kind of putting hoops through everything that they do. But having said that, some of the higher profile jobs, like the tech jobs, like some other jobs, are putting more hoops in part as part of the process, and making
So
it
let's talk about
harder.
some of those hoops. Like, what are
Yeah.
some of the hoops that you've heard about?
Well, definitely the interview thing is a large one. And then they also expand the amount of time. So what would normally take 60 days, and we thought, remember back in the day, 60 days was a long time to hire. Now it's 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
So 3 to 6 months, not only the length of time, but the amount of interviews that are going on. It's really insanity that people are going through this, and making it impossible for anybody to just go through a process and play the game as we traditionally did. Now that all the bets are off, that no telling what other hoop, and that makes me sus. I would, if I was looking for a job, that make me suspect if I'm going through that many interviews and not getting the communication I need to to kind of look forward to something.
Right. I think it's one thing if they set your expectation, we have 10 interviews that we're going to take you through, and this is why. But
Hmm.
I don't think that any organization is communicating that to their candidates. Ed, somebody had shared on Twitter and that there was a candidate that had 5 really great interviews. And at the end of the last interview, the fifth one, they said, "We really like you. It's going to be really great." So the candidate didn't hear anything for 2 weeks,
Yeah.
reached out and said, "Hey, what's going on?" A week after they reached out, they got this tiny little note. You don't meet the qualifications that we're looking for.
Yeah, yeah, and that's sad. I want to give a shout out to some people who joined us in the chat there. We know Damien's there. Damien, again, I'll be glad to read if you want to go ahead and participate. He has some tech. He just can't get on the link, which I can't. Every now and then it happens. Sweater Regmi, we both know. Thank you
Hi,
for joining us.
sweetie.
She just said that she's enjoying the discussion so far. So and she loves you. We also have Teddy Burris who joined us, and he's saying hi as well. So I just want to be sure to give them a shout out, and to whoever else is joining us. Hopefully, if you have any questions, feel free to throw it through. But yeah, I just really feel like there are some other things as well. I think the expectations are changing. I think also it's unclear of the future of how people will work are
Yeah.
is still up in the air. We know that there's some big tech companies who said, "Come on back to the office," and then all of a sudden the Delta variant came around and said, "Wait, let's hold on a second."
Yeah. Well,
So
and I don't blame I mean, I don't really blame employers for that because things change, and they're trying to react to this changing environment.
and
But
I
it creates this whole instability. Nobody knows what the heck is going on.
Yeah, I agree. And Teddy wrote here, he says, "Smoke and mirrors, recruiters don't know how to be honest." And I think there's some truth to that, but there's the other side that employers are not being honest with the recruiters. They're not being honest with them, and they're not being forthright as to what they expect. In other words, a recruiter can ask, "Hey, by the way, what is the salary range for this?" Now, there are, sometimes there are just lies that are given to recruiters, and therefore they can't communicate the salary. They're told pretty much, "Well, you don't worry about that right now." it's
Yeah.
like it's like
Yeah.
for real. Which really, I think some of that's got to come to the end in using this job market. That they've got to do a better job, and they're going to have to if they want to compete for talent. The company that's going to be most forthright and transparent is going to win the talent almost every time.
Absolutely, truthfulness, and I think one recruiter can oftentimes spoil the whole bunch. There are lots of really good recruiters out there, but you run into one bad one and it spreads like wildfire. So, I wouldn't judge all recruiters and say they don't know how to be honest because I think there are some really, really good ones. The
Yeah,
other thing
right.
that I will say about this is that the more and more jobs you'll see that the salary information being posted in the job ad.
Hmm.
I'm like, woohoo, it's about time.
Yes.
Colorado, a lot of places are like making that change, and that's
Yes.
really forcing other companies, other parts of the country to get on board with that. So if we can get better transparency up front in the job posting about salary, that's going to be great. And then that, for me, if a company doesn't post a salary, would be a big old red flag. Why haven't you posted your salary?
Right, right. If there's two, and that goes by the way. I think the real we've been telling this people for reals. You've said it, you've written about it. I've said it, and I've written about it. Is that, and I think it's more true now as companies begin to add more hoops. I think you need to add more companies to your slot of people you interview with,
Yes.
and make them go find you. I mean, if you're a job seeker, and if I was on the market right now, I would. just don't have 3 or 4 that you interview. Try to get 6 and 7 to interview with, and you set your schedule to the way that you need to in order, and let them know. Say, hey, I've got some. You can call them meetings. If you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, that's fine, but they'll get the point.
Yeah, yeah.
That you have several meetings, and that you need to start moving forward with these kinds of things. I really think there's time that as people, there's more information on job search and career advice than there ever has been at people's fingertips, to the point
Remember
to
when we
where
started, there was nothing, Mark. You
there,
and I and a few others
yeah,
were the only
yeah,
ones.
that's right. That's
We
right.
make ourselves look old.
And you've been right. I've been writing for 10 years, 11 years on the web, specifically targeting helping. You've been doing this since 2007, so so you got. I mean, between the both of us, we have thousands of articles that are
Yeah,
out there
yeah.
that and that's not including all the other people and our peers who have given us a lot of great advice throughout the years. You can find that, but there is a resource that people can use and that they need to go download. If you're listening right now, go to hrdive.com and actually put it in the search engine, put salary history. It will give you all the states and counties and cities that has salary history band information. And
Great.
some of that you can even get. There's some cities like in California, it's a little bit further along. They stipulate it and amend what the state has already put out. And New York has too. So you want to get that information and be equipped with that and find out, because there's still companies ask about salary history.
Yeah, and it
And
just proves that they're so behind the times. Like they just are not.
and it's like, yeah, right now it's about, it's not about you trying to dig me. I can forget you if I've got 6 other companies that I'm that and then
Yes.
five of them have already said what the salary is. The question is, how competitive are you with them? And then that will tell a bigger story about the company itself.
So there's another situation that I think that and some companies really understand how important it is to stay in contact with candidates as they're
Hmm.
going through the process,
Yep.
right? Sometimes we don't even get confirmation that they got our resume. But
Yes.
I was talking to one woman and she said, so I reached out to somebody and they said to apply online, which I did. And I got my standard applicant tracking system sort of automated message
Right.
saying your application has been received. She said, but then the next day I got a text message from somebody in HR that said that they appreciated the fact that I sent my resume and they would be in touch with me soon.
Yep.
So I said, that's something that's really great because that shows that company really values candidates that are in the pipeline, that are going through the process, and hopefully that's reflective of their culture as well. But
Yeah.
that's the other thing that I think job seekers can expect to be texting with recruiters much more today than they ever had been before. And they're just trying to streamline the process for as many people as possible.
Yeah, I wrote an article for a client, a company called Textio
Oh, yeah.
.io, and they're one of the front runners in having this kind of system in place where the recruiter can communicate directly with the candidate. However, those who are using it doesn't mean that they're also great communicators. And in fact, if you were a great communicator before the process, you're going to be a good one after it. But if you were terrible before,
It's
it
still going to
doesn't
be,
necessarily make you any better
yeah.
in communicating with the client. And sometimes it's not even the fact that you haven't said anything. Sometimes it's the verbiage that's involved, is saying that we're going to be you should be hearing with us within the next few days. Well, what is the next few days?
Yeah.
Sometimes I've even heard that people, you know, even texting back said, "I haven't heard from you in 2 weeks. Oh, please allow a couple of more days." What? It's really just sometimes it's kind of crazy to even try to tell people and tell recruiters when they say, "Well, we're doing this, but this is the result of the result is what people have to judge by, not what your intent is."
You're
And
right.
go ahead.
So here's what I always say to job seekers. They're like, "Well, when should I follow?" Or, when should I follow up? I'm like, I don't know. What do they say when you ask them, right? If we don't ask for a
Mhm.
specific time frame or window when we can follow up or when we can expect to hear from them, we'll never know. And if they say, "Well, we'll be in touch soon," in an interview or an email or a text, soon is not an answer. If the cable repairman said, "Oh, we'll be at your house soon," would
Yeah,
you accept that from them?
right.
No.
It's bad
So,
enough that they say 8 to 12 or 1 to
right,
5.
a
I mean, it's
4 hour
like,
window
boy.
or so I think it's really okay, and I want to encourage candidates to say, you know what, I've got a life too. I'm not going to be around waiting for them if they need to give me a time frame that's real.
Yeah, and it's only fair, I think, to the candidate. But like I said, so if you have 6 or
Old school.
7, if you have multiple interviews lined up and you're in the process in each of them, and the one who's communicating the best is going to have is going to be the one that's going to be the most competitive for, to get the best value out of the candidate.
It'll come across to the candidate that that company cares and the company wants you,
Yeah. Y
so
yeah. Yep, absolutely, and just to even add a footnote here, it's time for candidates to have a little bit more confidence and a little bit more faith in their own abilities. That you can't be contingent. You are not the response of the company. If you don't hear from a company, it's not automatically you. I mean, there's ways to discern that and kind of put that through the litmus test. But sometimes it's just the company and the industry and the way they operate. And a good company is going to be in touch with you and make sure that you don't run away, as opposed to the opposite. That you've got to be in that position, and that's what holds people back, is that they end up having just one, maybe two interviews, and they're hoping, but hope doesn't sell your abilities at all.
no, and even never stop your job search. Got 2 interviews, go keep applying, keep talking to people, see what
Yep.
else is out there.
Yep. I
And
just
never
heard.
stop, right? Never stop. Even when you get that new job, don't
I just
stop.
I just talked with someone recently who got that message, and I've been saying since the beginning, before pandemic, job search is a lifestyle, and you should never stop entertaining possibilities, whether it looks like in the form of networking, in the form of career development. Those things could be ongoing if you're just working, but even if somewhere where it starts to get a little funky, then maybe it's time to start looking elsewhere, and the employer should know that's going to be the MO of people who have talent and people who can do that. And really, most of us can if we're willing to put our position ourselves that way. But people
Yeah.
don't, because they're afraid to lose. They think they're on the losing end always instead of the winning end.
Yeah, and I think, I worked for a company once, and there was a manager that came to me and said, "I'm going to fire this person." They were working. I saw them working on their resume while they were supposed to be doing work. I'm like, "Wait a second. Number one, you can't really fire them for that. Number two, I don't want you to fire for them for that. Will you please go have a conversation with that employee and find out why they're looking for a job?"
Right. And three
Like,
is assumption that just because somebody's working on a resume, you should be able to keep a resume up, because you think about the company that can go under at any particular point.
absolutely.
People want to be ready. They have a livelihood and lives to be to protect.
I just think that we have allowed companies to have so much power and control over us for so long
Yep.
that, and that's why I'm sort of glad this pandemic and remote work and a lot of this stuff is changing, because I think it's going to empower employees. And I think people do feel now they have more of a say in their lifestyle, which they didn't have before. So
Right.
there's some good things that have come out of the pandemic, like
Yeah.
video interviewing. Like, why do you need to hustle yourself into an office for
Right.
every interview? That's
Right.
stressful.
Right.
Maybe
And the
the
thing
final one, but
And the ugly part is the interview process, where they use the video interview and they use companies. Uh, their first set of interviews is with the avatar, which I think is just really. you know. You know, yay, we clap for you for using the video interview for making it remote, but boo that you should allow uh, the software to tell you or to indicate to you what's a better presentation. And
Yeah.
it's not always what people think it is, because you can have a solid presentation, but because maybe the lighting wasn't exactly to where the software think it should be, or the camera angle doesn't recognize you and just hears your voice instead of seeing you, all these different types of issues. I think it's pretty bad. I think I love what Simone says. She says there are times for job hopping acceptance. And she brings up
Yes.
another part of this. I actually love when people have spent a year, got the experience, and willing to move on for something better. If something is better right now, why do they have the, we had this rite of passage that really should never have existed, but because we had parents that scared us to death, we thought that there's this etiquette. It's good etiquette if you stay 2 years, or a recruiter. I've heard recruiters say, if you haven't been with somebody for at least 2 years, I can't take you seriously. Well, probably they won't take you seriously either.
The pandemic has changed all that.
Yes, it has.
Thank
Yes, it has.
goodness.
Yes, and once you get, and great comment, once you get what you need from the employer, you're in the marketing business and
Mhm.
you go on for what's better. If a company got something a whole lot shorter time than they have anticipated, they're going to pivot. And you should do the same. And you need to be, and I use this word, you need to be as shrewd as the companies are. And I think shrewd is the right word for it. I don't apologize for it at all. It's not because you have much as advantage as the companies that are running it. They can always get somebody else. You can always get somebody else too.
Mhm. You really can. And I hope people feel that empowerment. There's so many people leaving right now, right? Because
Yeah.
they have had this time to think about, okay, what's really important to me? Does my employer allow me to pursue these things that are important to me, the free time, whatever it is, right?
Yes.
And so I think that's part of people want to feel like they are safe
Hmm.
and that they can have as stable as a life as possible,
Yeah.
and so that's what they're all looking for right now. And so God bless them. Go get it.
Yes, absolutely. Let's go on to talk about one of the other hot buttons. I'm
I knew
glad
this was
you were here.
coming. uh,
And Lord knows I've interrupted a lot of chats over the past year, particularly as we talked about the hidden job market. Uh, Myth or real thing? Are you ready to dig in?
yes, 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 yes.
So your thoughts?
I'm an old school kind of person.
Mhm.
Here is I do not believe it was initiated to market or spin services. What I think it did was to get, and what I hope it does is get people to think about, oh, is there a market other than what I see on the job board or in the newspapers?
Mhm.
That's what I want. Like there are jobs that you may not see, you may not be aware of. And that is what we mean by the hidden job market. It needs a new term. I get it. I would never use that to scare people, but I want to educate people because you know as well as I do, Mark, that
Mhm.
most job seekers think, oh, job search, let me log into Indeed and go see what's available.
Right.
If that is your only method of job search, there are lots of other jobs that aren't on Indeed that you are not seeing.
Yeah.
That's what that means.
I'm going to take you down a road that's never been down before. I'm sorry. That
I'm
was
ready.
yeah, bittersweet symphony. That's my quote from that song. But but I'm going to take you to another song. It's called "At This Moment." You remember from Billy Bira back in the early part of the '80s. The
Hum a few
song was
bars for me, my friend.
well at a later time. I'm
Okay.
making a point right now. But the song was written in 1981. It became popular in 1985. The song was already out there. So, is there a hidden song market?
Ah, interesting point.
let's take
So what do
movies.
we
There are
call that
movies.
market then? What do we call a song that we don't
Well,
know about?
do we have to call it a market? And even the word market is suggesting that there are people putting these hidden jobs out there. That is, we're going to hide this job in this
Yes.
place. I
Right,
mean,
right.
think about it, right? We have if a song is released on Spotify, does that mean that because it's not on iTunes, it's a hidden job because it's only on
All
Spotify?
right, it's a really good point.
You understand my point?
I
The same
got
with the
it. It's a
movies.
great analogy. I love it.
We can make that argument for movies. If a movie has come out a few years before and doesn't get into the theaters until a couple of years later, is there a hidden movie market now?
Good
I mean,
point. Love that.
it showed in New York and L.A., but it didn't show in Tampa and Chicago and Boston. Now, is that
Right.
a hidden movie market? I mean, to me, there isn't a logic to that. What it's good for, I think, has happened is for the career professional who says, I'll help you navigate the
Tap
hidden job
into.
market."
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, he can help me find those jobs that are not out there. When really you could do the same search that Career Pro can do.
Yes.
Uh, I'm going to read a couple of comments here from Damien, and let's see. Uh, he says in his group, Professionals Transition, by the way, for those who don't know, his group has helped more than 10,000 job seekers find jobs since 1992, in case you don't know. He says, professional transition member who thought he lost offer because the final step was a drug test. The third party sent him a link and went into spam. He simply deleted it.
Oh.
He followed up 3 days later asking about the link. The HR rep explained, and let's see, I guess, let's see, I'm trying to see the rest of the comment here. Explained the mysterious third party member and then said you have 3 hours to get the drug test and his offer would be rescinded. She said she would plead for a second chance. It was a crisis call. He was 100% convinced that he was out of a job. Bottom line, he called the hiring manager this morning and he got the job. And that's great in the sense that that worked out. But having said that, that goes back to some of that communication aspect that we talked about, where you sent the link, you didn't prepare the person, saying that link might go into your junk folder. Because I'm sure they're not that person was not the first person that they experienced that with,
Right.
so they
Right.
didn't get that warning. So therefore, you're going to then put, luckily that person got the job, but can you imagine just stress that person went under?
Well, and honestly, that should not have been the problem of the job seeker, that they weren't going to meet the deadline, and
Exactly.
that shouldn't have been their problem. That's something the
Exactly.
company should own. Don't make the candidate feel bad about that.
Yes. Yes.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
Companies are so high and mighty.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yeah, they are.
I love your analogy about the hidden job market. There is no hidden job market, and we all can agree to that, right? It
Right.
is like that song that you never heard or that
Yeah.
movie you never saw.
Right. Yeah, it was always out there, and if you looked hard enough, is what we kind of ask job seekers to take the extra step 2, 3, or 4 times, then is something's hidden from what you can't see. And I get that, but there's a lot of ways employers put jobs out there. They don't always go to Indeed or their website.
And that's what job seekers need to know, Mark,
Hmm.
right? So the average job seeker does not know this. The average job seeker does not know that there's a big price difference between posting a job on LinkedIn and posting a job on Indeed, right? And that not every job gets posted on LinkedIn. A
Right.
lot of right, and some people don't post a job on LinkedIn, but they may share it as a post in their status update. So they're just different ways companies will advertise their
Hmm.
openings.
Yes. And to your point is that I worked with a company, a big company. It wasn't all that small. It was 800 employees, but it wasn't all that big. They chose for some of the departments not to advertise for those jobs. through the newspapers and things at that particular time in those particular years, like everybody did. At that time, Career Builder and Monster
Were the big ones.
were the
And it
big
was
ones
expensive.
and very expensive. They chose to advertise through either word of mouth or through the free papers that were available. And so a lot of the free papers, and some of them in Chicago, they can have as much a circulation as 10,000 people. And so, but it was some of them were thick papers, some of them were thin papers, but albeit that they chose to use that method.
Yeah,
And and that doesn't mean that the jobs were hidden. That means they chose not to broadcast it on a large space.
right.
So
Absolutely.
big companies or companies that can afford it don't want to spend the money for that particular department for whatever reason that they have. And in fact, department could have big parties every year, but they spend little on advertising for the
Right.
job.
But in
So,
this, so one of the things, and I know you probably have talked about this before too, is though, one of the reasons why I want job seekers to create this sort of target list of companies they're interested in is so they can go
mhm,
to their company's career website, because most of them will have one, so they can sign up for the alerts or whatever and just monitor their career website, because that might be the only place the company will make a job announcement.
yes,
And they
yes,
do that
absolutely,
on purpose, because the company's logic is, if somebody really wants to work for us, then they'll see this on our website because
yeah.
they already know about us.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Scott Bennett is a friend of mine who's an author and psychotherapist. Wrote a resume book back in the day. He joined us from Facebook. He says that employers' failure to adequately check lab vendors is an important clue about the culture of the organization. That is right on the money, isn't it? I mean, it really does say a lot about how employers need to also understand their own funnel and distribution of information, and also how they relate to employees as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yep. So I think that was a great comment. And Simone comes back in and she says she interviewed for a posted job with the recruiter. During the interview, job was filled already. Took another job through the same recruiter. 1 week later, same job with first interview was posted again. I called the recruiter to inquire. They said they forgot to remove. We've heard that before. And
Happens
I said,
all the time.
yes, yes, it
Now,
does.
that's not really hidden. That's just stupidity.
And we've seen the opposite as well, where the employer forgot there was a job description out there they never hired. They just keep it out there.
All
People
the
keep
time.
applying, yeah, and it happens a lot. And that's an anomaly again. If you got 6 or 7 other interviews,
Doesn't matter
you
as
could,
much.
it won't
Right,
matter.
and so people say, they come back to me a lot. I have the same, like, a client will come to me and say, "I applied for this job. They screened me, but they didn't want to move me forward. But now I see the job is posted again. Should I reapply?" I'm like, "It's your call. I mean, they're probably not going to talk to you, but you never know."
Yeah.
Companies are fishing, and if you don't have somebody that you've spoken to inside the company, then you'll never have the intel that you need to understand what's really going on there. Like,
Hmm.
there could be 1,000 reasons why the job was left up or the job was put back up or whatever. We don't know. We can't assume the job is still available or that the person didn't. We don't know.
Yeah, yeah, right. I completely agree. And last comment comes from Damien, and then we'll wrap it up. Says my old boss posted one comment, not job position, in LinkedIn, encouraging them to contact her directly for a global senior vice president, and that's common. That's common,
Yeah.
depending, and that's the way that really the C-suite works. The C-suite works in such a way is that
Talking.
you're not going to see the job on Indeed. You're going to see talk through the different forums, or maybe word of mouth, or through the network that you're in, or through the industry organization,
Or even a
using,
retained recruiter, an
or a
executive
retained
recruiter.
recruiter many times. So yes, and I know a lot of people who aspire to to break through that next message have to come to some understanding that you need to get in that network in some kind of way, so you can have people to vouch for you. And it's not, it won't be a matter of resume or credentials for that you're well known is
Yeah.
going to get you past the gatekeepers,
Yeah.
whoever those gatekeepers are. So, really quick, we just have a couple of minutes before the top of the hour. What do you have coming up? Should the people know about?
Ooh, everybody should know about JobScan's No Fear Job Search webinar series that is starting next week.
Yes.
So there's a ton, there's like 3 weeks of webinars
Yes.
of online classes that are coming up on everything
Hmm.
from LinkedIn, resume, cover letter.
Free.
I'm doing one on job search over 50. I think it's
Yep.
September 23rd. That's what I've got
Yep.
coming up.
Yep. Yep. Shout out to JobScan.
Yeah, I love
It's been a
JobScan.
great again. Some of my guy Niatu Bensi and Chill is part of the program, as well as a
Yes.
whole bunch of others.
Yep,
So that's going to be a good one. You don't want to miss. Go to jobscan.co, I think is the
it
correct
is.
site.
No Fear
Yep.
Job
Yep.
Search webinar series. It's our second
Yep.
annual.
And you can look it up on Google that way. Uh, I have an interview coming up. I'm doing a special thing, and it's hard to explain, but anyway, a lot of people know Melinda Emerson. She recently wrote a book called How to Be Your Own Boss in 12 Months. She's got blue checks on every single social program around. I think her total following is like in the millions, I think. I'm going to be talking to her on Tuesday live through the social channels. So I'll be streaming to LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. So you definitely don't want to miss that. That's going to be 9 a.m. Central. So feel free to join me and ask questions about her book. I think the future of work is going to be the 1099 independent contractor. I think we're going to see a lot more as we see the breakdown of a lot of different industries. I think the day of reckoning is yet to come for education and healthcare. So that remains to be seen. But, we could talk about that on another show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Hannah, so much for joining me on the Modern Job Search Checklist. And Damien, thank you very much for joining via chat when you couldn't get in. I'm sorry. I don't know why you couldn't get in. Sometimes I think there are filters in different on different Wi-Fi networks that don't allow you to get through shows that might carry a lot of bandwidth. That's my theory, but I think that might be the reason why. So those of you who think about live streaming, that's a downside. In the meantime, we're going to see you next Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. I believe we had a couple of guests that we got coming up, and I can't remember which order there is. I think one of them is Lauren Griff. She's going to be with us
Nice.
here. And we got a couple of others, and I'm sorry that we're not able to remember your name at the moment. But join us again. We're going to call it here. Peace in the Valley of Love. Thank you very much for joining us on the Modern Job Search Checklist. We'll see you next week.